Every sail was set. No one was on board to sail them. On a January morning in 1921, a five-masted schooner ran itself onto a sandbar off the coast of North Carolina. The deck was empty. The wheel was unmanned. Below deck, breakfast was still on the stove. She was built in 1919, in Bath, Maine, by the G.G. Deering Company. 255 feet of wood and canvas, 5 masts, one of the last great sailing schooners built before steel took over commercial shipping for good. Some accounts say she was named for the owner's son. Others say his youngest daughter. The company's own records on this point are inconsistent, so we won't pretend to know for certain. Verify before asserting either. By January 1921, she was under the command of Captain Willis B. Wormell, 66 years old, a veteran of decades at sea, who'd come aboard partway through this voyage after the ship's original captain fell ill in Delaware. Her first mate was a man named Charles B. McClellan. By at least one account, the relationship between McClellan and Wormell was not a good one. Some retellings claim McClellan made a threatening remark toward the captain before the voyage home began. That claim is secondhand and disputed. We're flagging it here, not asserting it. What is documented? The Deering left Norfolk in August of 1920, sailed to Rio de Janeiro, delivered a cargo of coal, and turned north to make the long return voyage home. In early January 1921, while docked in Barbados, Wormell walked the beach with an old friend, a fellow ship's captain named G.W. Bunker. Wormell told him this was the worst crew he had ever sailed with in his career, that the strain of managing them had exhausted him. 3 weeks later, every member of that crew was gone. On January 28th or 29th, the Deering passed the Cape Lookout lightship, off the North Carolina coast. The lightship's keeper, Captain Thomas Jacobson, later reported something unusual. The crew was milling around on the ship's quarterdeck, a part of the vessel ordinary sailors weren't typically permitted to occupy. A crewman hailed the lightship through a megaphone. He reported that the Deering had lost both anchors and chains in a storm off Cape Fear and asked that the ship's owners be notified. Jacobson would later describe the man as tall, thin, red-haired, his speech broken, his accent foreign. Jacobson took him for Scandinavian. He noted the man didn't carry himself or speak like an officer. Verify exact wording of Jacobson's description before using as direct quote. Jacobson tried to relay the warning. His own radio was out of order. The message never reached shore in time. The last confirmed sighting came the following evening, around 5:45 p.m., when another passing vessel reported the Deering sailing a course that led directly toward Diamond Shoals, one of the most dangerous stretches of water on the Atlantic coast. On the morning of January 31st, in low visibility and rough weather, a Coast Guard lookout spotted her, hard aground, sails still set. No sign of anyone moving on deck. Storms kept rescue crews from reaching the wreck for days. On February 4th, 1921, a boarding party finally reached the Carroll A. Deering. The ship itself was in good condition, not taking on water, structurally sound. Every sail was set except the flying jib. Below deck, the boarding party found coffee and soup still on the stove, spare ribs in a pan. A meal, in progress, untouched. Verify exact food items. The captain's cabin was in disarray. The ship's papers, her log, her navigation instruments, all gone. Both lifeboats were missing. There was no blood. No sign of struggle. Nothing suggesting cargo had been looted, and the ship herself, worth far more than anything aboard her, had been left behind rather than stolen. Whatever had happened, it hadn't looked like piracy. It looked like a decision. Coast Guard Captain R.L. Gaskell, one of the first officers to spot the wreck, dismissed the piracy rumors outright. He called them, in his words, so much newspaper bunk. His explanation was simpler and grimmer. With the ship grounded in winds reported near 90 miles an hour, the crew may have taken the lifeboats in a desperate attempt to reach shore, 9 miles away, and drowned in the attempt. Later that year, the case took a strange turn. A man named Christopher Columbus Gray reported finding a message in a bottle washed up near Buxton, North Carolina. A note, he said, from a crew member, describing the Deering's men as captured by pirates. It became a national sensation. In 1922, Gray confessed. He had written the note himself, reportedly for the reward money and the attention it brought him. It was a hoax by his own admission. Whatever evidence anyone thought they had about pirates, about a crew crying out for help, none of it came from the ship. It came from a man on a beach who made it up. 5 separate federal agencies eventually investigated the case: the Coast Guard, the Department of Justice, the Department of Commerce, the State Department, and the Navy. That level of coordinated federal attention on a single missing merchant crew was, and remains, unusual. Whatever happened aboard the Deering, it happened fast enough that no one finished eating, and slow enough that someone had time to gather the ship's papers and walk away. The myth versus the facts. Over the past century, the Carroll A. Deering has been folded into the same mythology as the Bermuda Triangle, grouped alongside stories like Flight 19 and the Mary Celeste. It's worth noting, she didn't wreck within the Triangle's traditional boundaries. She only passed near it on her route home. Legend, the message in the bottle, the pirate note that made national headlines in 1921, was confirmed a hoax by its own author within a year. And yet, a century later, it still circulates in modern retellings as though it were genuine testimony from the crew. It wasn't. Say that plainly. Legend-adjacent 1,921 newspapers floated theories involving Bolshevik pirates, rogue German U-boats 2 years after the war's end, and international hijacking rings. These weren't drawn from evidence found aboard the ship. They were drawn from the anxieties of the moment, Prohibition-era smuggling fears, and a fresh, lingering wariness of foreign threats after the First World War. What the evidence actually supports is quieter and harder to dramatize. A captain who told a friend, weeks earlier, that his own crew frightened him. A first mate with reported friction toward that captain. A crew observed behaving strangely in a part of the ship they didn't belong. And then, papers gathered, instruments removed, lifeboats launched, in what looks less like panic and more like a decision. Most historians point toward some form of mutiny or crew breakdown, followed by an attempt to reach shore that ended in the shoals. That is the strongest theory the record supports, not a confirmed fact, and no official body ever closed the case on it. Where the trail ends. Not one member of the Carroll A. Deering's crew, not Wormel, not McClellan, not any of the other 9 men aboard, was ever found, alive or dead. The wreck itself was later destroyed by the Coast Guard as a hazard to navigation. Some of her timbers reportedly washed ashore near Cape Hatteras afterward. 5 federal agencies investigated the disappearance of the Carroll A. Deering. Not one of them ever agreed on a final answer. A century later, the record still doesn't have one. The sea gave the ship back. It never gave back the men. And